Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is the grace and ease question, and I think by way of a little bit of an explanation is I think one of the things that I'm good at, and you all have come to value, is that when something is alive for me, when something is spontaneously arising, and I'm excited about it, that's worth sharing. So sometimes it's worth going off of the we've been doing the personal mythology stuff, and we can come back to that. But today I want to talk about this because it's alive, and I've been really thinking about how simple and effective this is. And it started off by me brainstorming how to help people get unstuck from depression. But this is really relevant to anyone for anything. But depression, I think, is a great litmus test, because I think depression, quote unquote, what I would call freeze of fight, flight, or freeze or survival mode, is the most difficult state to get out of. It's the least preferable defense mechanism for our biological desire to get out of a dangerous situation. So it's the last resort. In other words, if we are in survival mode for a good reason, and there is a real threat, we prefer to fight it successfully or run away from it successfully. Really, firstly, we prefer to run away from it successfully. If we have to, we prefer to fight it successfully. But the last resort is when our nervous system is like, this is too much. We're overwhelmed, and that's when we freeze and we play dead, or we go numb, or we unleash the chemicals that anesthetize us, and maybe even bring in painkillers because we're about to get mauled or something like that. And so these are really, there's a tremendous amount of mercy in our evolutionary design, and that we have the capacity to dissociate, go numb, be filled with opioids and painkillers in a overwhelming, dangerous situation, to play dead in the event that whatever is maybe attempting to attack us will lose interest or move on. But it is a last resort, and human beings can get stuck in this last resort place, and it's very hard to get out of. And one of the reasons why it's hard to get out of is because the very thing that we must do is the very thing that our biology is telling us is dangerous. So the very thing that we must do, move, our neurochemistry is attempting to, it is under the impression that it's not safe to move. Why is it not safe to move? It's not safe to move because predators see motion. A lot of them, actually, their visual acuity is based on picking up motion. And if we're still, if we're frozen, we're invisible. And so therefore we're safe. So when this part of the nervous system is activated, whether it's activated in a kind of major prolonged way, and by the way, when we say depressed from a clinical perspective, it means that this has been lasting for a few weeks at least, for the most part. And there's a number of other factors that need to be met. So people oftentimes use that, I'm depressed, and really they're just, their nervous system is in freeze, and that's, maybe for 20 minutes or an hour or a couple hours. And so the point is that the way out of freeze is to move. And we can't wait, as you've heard me say, we can't wait until we feel like it, because if we're waiting till we feel like it, we're not going to feel like it. It's by moving that we figure out, oh wow, I'm safe, I'm mobile, I can get away, I can run away, I can defend myself, or I can, or I realize that the threat was, and by the way, if you're in a real threat and you really do need to stay frozen and hidden, please do. So again, we're always talking about here the difference between real threat that activates your survival mode, and you need those biological advantages of your unconscious reactivity, and perceived threat, which is most of what is causing human suffering and human health problems. Is most of the time we are in fight or flight or freeze based on our perceived experience. I'm in traffic and I'm angry, using fight energy, using fight, flight, or freeze, fight to grip the steering wheel, and there's no threat. There's no tiger trying to eat our throat. That's what I'm talking about, that type of stuff. Or I'm in freeze, even though there is a logical, if we have to think about the reasons why the threat is real, that's not the system for survival mode. That's not, we don't want to be using survival mode. Like, so even though there is a real, so say you're overwhelmed and because you can't find a job and you're not making enough money and you're not going to be able to pay your rent, there are real survival issues associated with that. And it is understandable that those trigger our survival mechanism. But survival mode is not the best way to solve those problems and situations, because while there is down the line real survival issues, the survival mode is designed for that immediate life or death situation. But we get in a state where we kind of get frozen or overwhelmed or numb, about doing the dishes or about having to get our kids to school on time, or, some autobiographical situations, or whatever it is, that we feel overwhelmed by the modern stresses and strains of life. And it's true, it's relatively true, because we are living in a world, most of us are living in a world that has unreasonable expectations, or expectations that do not, the saying, it's not wise to become well adjusted to a sick society. And so to some degree, we have a sick society. And so to be able to force ourselves to meet the demands of that sick society is not necessarily healthy or wise. And at the same time, there are some stuff that's outside of our control, and to a certain degree, sometimes we need to get with the program, so to speak, and make the money or do the thing to. And so that's a balance, right? To not gaslight ourselves about the real challenges of, the overwhelm, and most of us are busy and tired and not getting enough sleep and all that stuff. Okay. So we can be kind and gentle, or compassionate and understanding about that, but also we can also recognize it's not literally that life or death threat. I literally don't want to be in survival mode, even though I really do want to, use my creative resources to find a new job to make enough money to pay for my rent. Okay. So we need to be actually in thriving mode in order to navigate that situation more successfully. And yet we often will get frozen or stuck, or we'll be angry or frustrated about our situation. We'll be afraid, worried, obsessing, ruminating, or we'll be frozen, shut down, overwhelmed, numb, done, tired, exhausted, no motivation, no inspiration, no joy, no zest for life. Okay. And so this is the hardest state to get out of, because our nervous system has been convinced, so to speak, that it's not safe to move. And then another irony is that if we move too much and our body registers that as an overwhelm, it can trigger the alarm system again and put us back into freeze. So for example, I'm depressed, or I'm stuck, or I'm frozen, which is a better reframe, I think, because depressed is a whole story. Freeze is something that is actually a practical thing that you can work with. and story, and the story that is depression is oftentimes amorphous and has elements of it that are far beyond our control. So if I'm frozen and I don't need to be, meaning there's not a tiger trying to eat my throat, there's not a knife at my neck right now, and it would be more optimal for me to be in thriving mode, then I need to move. But so say it is one of those. I've been frozen. I'm stuck on the couch and watching too much YouTube videos or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I motivate myself and I go out for a run. But then I was a little bit out of shape, and then I get so sore from that run, that my body feels overwhelmed again, and I go back into a deeper state of freeze. Or where the grace and ease question, but I really, really, really want to emphasize, I think it's a really cool thing that it can get us out of the most difficult state to get out of. And that should be evidence that it is super potent and effective in other states as well, not that it is only effective in the freeze situation. But I'm going to explain it through the freeze situation. And because when I do the grace and ease question is, what is the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do in the direction that I value and choose? And when I frame it, when I do that, I am already activating thriving mode, because thriving mode's foundation is based on acceptance and kindness. And if I am doing more than what is easy or that I'm willing to do, if I'm not willing to do it, then it's a should. It's something I think I should do, I must do, I ought to do, I have to do. All of those are a subtle form of psychological distress, a subtle form of psychological threat, even if it's our own internal mechanism. I have to do it, I must do it, I should do it is based on some other, imposition of a belief structure. Or I must do it, I have to do it. That's a imposition. And so we are still in survival mode if we are operating from the should, the must, the ought to. But if we're thriving mode, we are already into some of what you all know as the Jolka GPS compass. So Jolka, joy, openness, love, kindness, awareness, gratitude, presence, surrender. We don't need to have all of them, but if we have any of those going, we know that we're in thriving mode. And so if I just take kindness, which we can define as being with things as they are, the grace and ease question is kindness embodied. It is saying, what is the next, meaning it's available, I can do it, it's here. So I'm with what is easiest thing. What is the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? There is no should, there is no must, there is no ought. I'm genuinely willing to do it. There's no resistance. And that's why, and it doesn't matter how small, you need to break it down. And this is a really important point, because most people will even still have the shoulds, the musts, the oughts coming in, even when they're doing this. They think they're doing this practice, but they still, don't break it down even small enough. And it's really, really essential for the type of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means it's coming from within. It's not imposed by any belief structures or outer forces. It's coming from inside. That is essential for moving out of depression. right? What do a lot of people say that when they're depressed is that they've lost motivation. Well, we are rediscovering intrinsic motivation. And the more you rediscover it, the more it grows. And so what I mean by this is that if you do the next easiest thing that you're willing to do, when you do it and you do it successfully, there's a mechanism that goes, oh, I intended to do it. I'm doing it. I did it. Closes the loop. Success. Bing. That lights up the part of the brains that say, oh, I'm moving forward. I'm succeeding. I have agency. I have self-efficacy. I'm moving. And so I'm really, really breaking this down, and I'm going slow with it because it's super countercultural and almost a little counterintuitive, but it actually makes perfect sense. And it really, really works well. No matter where no matter what is going on in your life, it is a very skillful approach, because those steps, when you do start doing the next easiest thing that you're willing to do, sometimes it's super, super tiny, but they can start to get exponentially larger really quickly, organically. You do not need to force it. And so you can do this if you are frozen or if you are depressed. You can do this in a way that does not trip your alarm system to go back into the overwhelm. And you can very, very much build it sustainably and organically. And so it looks like that, and it might be that literally the next easiest thing that you're willing to do is to just ask the question. It could be that small. It could literally be finding your direction, your north. So you start with the north. Well, when I remember, part of the statement is, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do in the direction that I value and choose? The direction that I value and choose is your north on the compass. North is not someplace that you ever get to. North is a direction. Our goals, and we think that goal ascertainment is going to bring us happiness. When I get there, I'll finally be Jolka GPS. I'll finally, we think our joy, our openness, our love, our kindness, our awareness, our gratitude, our presence, our surrender is there in the goal. And when I get to there, I will finally feel the way that I want to feel. I'll finally feel fulfilled. I'll be thriving. That's not the way it works. We have to be thriving in order to get to the goal. And then we realize that the goal is just a signpost. The goal is just a direction. And there's another goal, not in a way that feels unsatisfying, because the satisfaction is built into the process. When you do the next easiest thing that you're willing to do, you start flowing with, and you start to get into flow states in your simple, ordinary, everyday life, not necessarily dependent upon, skiing down a mountain or playing sports or all the things that we maybe think are relegated for flow states, but flow states in just your day-to-day, in this moment. When you're in flow, that naturally arises the Jolka GPS. They go hand in hand. So you're already coming from a place of satisfaction, of enjoyment, of love, of kindness, of awareness, of gratitude, of presence. And then, sure, it's wonderful. Goalposts are like cities. You're moving north, and along the way, you're going to go through a city, and it's great to check out what the city has to offer. Maybe that city has particularly cool restaurants or live music or something like that. It's great, wonderful. But the city is not the your life is continually moving north. And so we can have meta north, or we can have micro norths. And, so it could be, I want to get a new job and make this amount of money, but it also, that could be your direction. So you could say, well, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do to move in that direction? And that's how you frame the grace and ease question. Or you could say, like, oh, I want to get rid of this headache. Well, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? And it doesn't even need to be logical. The answer doesn't even need to be logical. You have the freedom to go with whatever arises and whatever is spontaneous. And so when I say, okay, I want to get rid of this headache. What's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? Just ask the question and sit here. I'm willing to do that. There's no resistance. I'm willing to do that. I asked the question. Now I'm just willing to sit here. Find that I'm willing to take a deep breath in and let it out. I'm willing to I'm doing this organically right now. I'm willing to suspend it out. I'm willing to breathe back in. I'm willing to yawn, stretch, twist, flex, pendiculate. Ooh, so life is coming back into my body. I'm willing to stand up. Do that again. Now, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? I'm willing to smile. I'm willing to sigh. Okay. And so, it starts going. Those are all things that are going to directly affect me alleviating a headache. The moving, the breathing, the stretching, the twisting, that's going to, but maybe at one point that is the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do is go drink a glass of water. Maybe it's go and take it. Maybe it's go and take an aspirin. But whatever's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do, I'm now operating not in resistance. I'm just operating in flow, and I'm following my own wisdom, my inner wisdom. And maybe maybe it's the bigger thing. It's the goal. It's the job thing. And so maybe, maybe it's you're willing. Please stay with what willing. Take a chance. Stay with what you're willing to do. Be truly kind, and you might find that you get even better result. Because here's the thing. So say it's just that I'm willing to maybe edit my resume. But I know, but I really should. I ought to. I have to submit it. I have to fill out that. Well, do what you're willing to do, even if there's a deadline tomorrow. If you're in, oh my God, I gotta do, you're gonna freeze. You're gonna shut down. But if I'm willing. Okay, I'm willing to edit it. All right, and you will build the momentum, and you're more likely to get it done on time and do a better job with it. Okay. And so so most people think they're trying to set up as many of the unknown steps as possible. They want to know what they are going to be. Something takes 0 to 100 steps. It takes 0 to 100 steps to get that job application done. And we're should, must, oughting ourselves to be at step 50 when we're on step 2. And when we should, must, ought, and when we're perceiving the gap between step 2 and step 50, and we feel overwhelmed by that, and we should, must, ought do step 50, what ends up happening is we put ourselves in survival mode. It shuts down our creative thinking capacities. We get out of flow. We're not as creative or inspired. We feel either angry, afraid, or numb and depressed and unmotivated. And now we're stuck in a reactive tension. Plus, what we don't realize is that when we do the next easiest thing that we're willing to do, we're also doing the best thing that we can do. We are taking the next best step. And if we take the next best step at step 2 to 3, and then again at 4 to 5, and then again at 6 to 7, you're going to find that there are chutes and ladders spots where you go from 7 organically to 21. Or you're going to find that you discover something that makes all 50 steps obsolete and transcends them and puts you at a higher level than the whole process. But by doing the artificial, by laying out the map artificially by what you think you must do or ought to do or should do, you actually are guaranteeing a more limited result. But by doing the next easiest thing that you're willing to do, by doing the next best thing, you are guaranteeing that you are taking the most efficient and effective route north possible. So there's more to this, but I want to check our time. Yeah, that's about it. There's more components to this, and maybe we'll talk about those another time. But for now, just play around with taking a chance on making it even smaller, even easier, and seeing what happens when you really, really, really lean into the question. What's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do to move in the direction that I value and choose, and honor and respect whatever comes up, even if it seems tiny, 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 even if it seems like nothing, it's doing something. If you're doing it deliberately, it's something. There is no such thing as nothing. If you are willing to sit there and do nothing, that's what you're doing. And now you're in presence. And now you're in kindness, two of them. You have Jolka GPS, you have K and P. You're aware, you have A. You're open, you have O. You're letting go of all the shoulds, the musts, that's surrender. Here you have S. And so joy and love arise in that environment as well. So play with what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do in the direction that I value and choose. Build sustainably, easily, organically, in a way that makes perfect sense to result in the best possible outcomes, which you for sure do not know at step 2. Especially if you're following it, if you can predict it all, you know for a fact you're not producing the best outcomes because you've missed out on the step 10 leading to step 72 moment, which wipes out the whole ladder and has you in a whole different dimension. Exponentially better results that come from being willing actually to not know what the 4th or 5th step is, but to simply do what is the next easiest thing that you're willing to do, and then do, and then do, and then boom, and boom, and then okay. So it's actually the only possible way to, one, be coming from flow and joy, openness, love, kindness, awareness, gratitude, presence, surrender, to be in thriving mode. But it's also the only way to guarantee the best possible outcomes. And it's also the only way to feel secure and grounded, because what we're doing is when we're trying to think about steps 0 to 100, what we're really doing is trying to make the unknown known. And that is an attempt out of fear of the unknown, out of a desire to control the process. We are in survival mode, and we feel the lack, the 0. So the 3 poisons, we feel the lack of where we are between where we want to be, that lack, that gap. We feel afraid, and then we try to fight for control. So lack, fight for fear, fight for control, 3 poisons. And then we are attempting to predict, make it known. And then when we follow out what we think we should do or ought to do or must do because we know what the steps are, or what we think we know what the steps are, we then are in survival mode, and survival mode narrows our focus to be only on that path. We miss all the other golden opportunities to transcend the path altogether, to level up, to go a different route that we never would have seen, to find a miraculous experience or a serendipity or whatever it is that is the stuff that is truly creative and inspired. So, and then we are, and like I said, so we're trying to attempt to build security, even though we know, actually, logically, even if we're looking at it really honestly right now, we know that we can't really know the steps 0 to 100. We just think we should know them before we move. And then we try to plan them out. And that is an attempt to gain a false sense of security. Why is it false? It's false because we actually know that life doesn't ever go the way it's planned. And if we're operating on that artificial premise as a way to make ourselves feel more secure in the face of the unknown, we are attempting to find security in an illusion, in a delusion. We are attempting to find security in building a house of cards. We are attempting to find security and constancy and stability in something that does not exist other than as our thought structure about how we think it should go or ought to go or must go. But when we are following the grace and ease question, we're actually, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? That means it's next, it's easy, I'm willing, I'm standing on solid ground. I can always rely on that question. I can always rely on the present moment. I can always rely on my thriving sense of self. I can always rely on awareness. And then awareness, asking the question, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? Something's going to come up. Always. Something is going to come up. It will, it can't not. What is the next easiest thing I'm willing to do? I'm willing to yawn. It doesn't matter what it is. Something will always come up, and you can rely on that because that is the ground of being. That is reality. The future is not reality. The past is not reality. The present, the P on the Jokel GPS, is all there really is. So when you are following the grace and ease question, you are now in touch with the base of reality, and you can rely on that, and that feels grounded and secure. So we are ironically, we're trying to gain a sense of grounding and security by trying to think we should do it or must do it this way or that way. And then we wonder why we don't feel secure, why we feel insecure, and why we feel anxious is, well, because we're relying on something that doesn't exist. Instead of coming back to what is actually the case and following it step by step in a way that starts to build easily, naturally, organically into something better and better than we could have ever imagined. All right. Have a beautiful day, everybody.